A father's greed, a sister's sacrifice, a devil's bargain that might be her salvation. When Arya Valenti's ruthless crime lord father announces he's selling her gentle sister Lena to a sadistic old Don, she knows she has only one move left: offer herself to an even more dangerous man. Dominic Romano is young, powerful, and utterly merciless. Everyone says marrying him is a death sentence, but Arya would rather burn in hell than watch her sister suffer. What she doesn't expect is that the monster might see her as more than a pawn, and that choosing her own cage might be the first step toward freedom. If you're hooked, stay until the end, and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. Hit that like button, and let's dive in. Cut. The crystal chandelier above the dining table cast fractured light across the faces of men who traded in blood and fear. Arya Valenti sat perfectly still, spine straight, hands folded in her lap, her expression as neutral as a blank canvas. She'd learned long ago that invisibility was survival in her father's house. Salvatore Valenti sat at the head of the table like a king on a throne of bones, his gray-streaked hair slicked back, his rings glinting as he gestured expansively with a glass of whiskey. Around him, his captains laughed at jokes that weren't funny, their eyes calculating, always measuring what they could take. Arya barely heard them. Her attention was fixed on her younger sister. Lena sat 2 seats down, her face pale, her hands trembling so badly she'd given up trying to hold her fork. At 19, she still had that soft, unguarded quality. The kind that made her smile at strangers, cry at sad movies, believe that people were fundamentally good. Their father had kept her sheltered, protected from the worst of his world. Until tonight. Lena. Salvatore's voice cut through the conversation like a blade. The table fell silent. Come here, Principessa. Lena's chair scraped against the marble floor. She stood on unsteady legs, smoothing her dress with shaking hands as she approached their father. Arya's fingernails dug into her palms. Salvatore pulled Lena close, his arm around her waist in a gesture that might have looked paternal to someone who didn't know better. Gentlemen, let me introduce you properly to my youngest daughter. Beautiful, isn't she? Pure. Unspoiled. The way he said it made Arya's stomach turn. She's going to make someone a very lucky husband, Salvatore continued, and Arya saw Lena's face go even paler. In fact, I have an announcement. Lena is engaged. The room erupted in congratulations. Lena stood frozen, her eyes wide with shock and dawning horror. To Don Marchetti, Salvatore finished. The name landed like a stone in still water. Even the captain's smiles faltered. Carlo Marchetti was 70 if he was a day, a relic from the old country who'd built his fortune on prostitution and protection rackets. He was known for his cruelty, his paranoia, and his taste for young wives. He'd had 3, and rumor said the last one had thrown herself from a balcony rather than endure another day with him. Arya was moving before she'd made a conscious decision to stand. Papa? Sit down, Arya. Salvatore didn't even look at her. She's 19. She's my daughter, and she'll do as she's told. Now Salvatore's eyes found hers, and they were cold enough to freeze blood. Just as you will. When I decide it's your turn. Sit. Down. Arya remained standing for 1 heartbeat longer, just long enough to be defiance, not long enough to be outright rebellion. Then she lowered herself back into her chair, every muscle rigid with fury. Lena was crying silently now, tears streaming down her face as Salvatore's captains toasted to her future. To the alliance with Marchetti's territory, to profit and power. Not one of them mentioned love. Not one of them looked at Lena's tears and saw anything worth saving. Arya found Lena in her bedroom hours later, curled on her bed in the dark, still wearing her dinner dress. Go away, Lena whispered. Arya closed the door behind her and crossed to the bed. She sat on the edge, her hand finding Lena's shoulder. We're going to fix this. How? Lena's voice cracked. You heard him. He's already made the deal. Marchetti is expecting me in 3 weeks. 3 weeks, Arya. I know. Do you know what they say about him? What he did to his last wife? She was 22 when she married him, 24 when she died. They said she was covered in bruises, that she begged the guards to let her leave, but they wouldn't because Marchetti had paid them. Stop. Arya's voice was firm. You're not going to marry him. Lena sat up, her face blotchy from crying. Papa won't change his mind. You know he won't. He's been planning this for months. He needs Marchetti's alliance to expand into the port territories. Then we'll find another way. There is no other way. Lena's voice rose, desperate. Unless you can magically produce another alliance, another deal that gives Papa what he wants. She stopped mid-sentence, her eyes widening. Arya felt it too. The spark of an idea, dangerous and half-formed. What? Lena breathed. You're thinking something. I can see it on your face. Arya stood and moved to the window, looking out over the grounds of their father's estate. Manicured gardens, high walls, armed guards at every gate. A beautiful prison. There's a rumor, she said slowly. One of the drivers was talking about it this afternoon. Dominic Romano made an offer. Lena's breath caught. Romano? The new boss of the Romano family. Yes. Everyone knew about Dominic Romano. He'd taken over his father's territory 2 years ago at 28, and in that short time, he'd tripled their holdings, crushed 2 rival families, and established himself as one of the most dangerous men in the underworld. He was young, ruthless, and terrifyingly smart. What kind of offer? Lena asked. A marriage alliance. He wants to unite the families. Arya turned from the window. Papa hasn't responded yet. He was waiting to finalize the Marchetti deal first. Understanding dawned slowly across Lena's face, followed by hope, then fear. But if Papa thought Romano was the better option, he might be persuaded to choose that alliance instead. You mean I might marry Romano instead of Marchetti? Lena's hands twisted in her lap. Is that better? Everyone says Romano is just as bad. Worse, maybe. At least Marchetti is old. Romano is young enough to... I know what Romano is, Arya said quietly. But he's not sadistic. Ruthless, yes. Violent when he needs to be. But strategic. He doesn't hurt people for pleasure. And his first wife died in childbirth 5 years ago. No rumors of abuse, no stories of cruelty. The women who work in his club say he treats them fairly, pays well, doesn't tolerate any of his men crossing lines. It wasn't much, but in their world, it was something. Lena was quiet for a long moment. You really think Papa would consider it? Romano's offer is probably better than Marchetti's, territorially speaking. Papa's just stubborn. He likes to make people wait, show them he's the one with power. Arya sat back down on the bed. But if we could convince him, how? That was the question, wasn't it? Salvatore Valenti didn't listen to his daughters, didn't value their opinions, their thoughts, their lives beyond what those lives could purchase. I don't know yet, Arya admitted. But we have 3 weeks. I'll find a way. Lena grabbed her hand, squeezing tight. You promise? You swear you won't let him give me to Marchetti? Arya looked at her sister, her soft, gentle sister who still believed in fairy tales and happy endings, who deserved so much more than this life of violence and fear. I promise, she said. Whatever it takes. The opportunity came faster than expected. 2 days later, a message arrived from Dominic Romano, delivered by a man in an expensive suit who waited in the foyer with the patience of someone who knew his boss's name carried weight. Salvatore kept him waiting for an hour, petty power plays, before finally granting an audience. Arya wasn't supposed to be listening, but she'd learned long ago that information was currency, and the best information came from knowing things you weren't meant to know. She positioned herself in the library, where a heating vent carried sound from her father's study. Mr. Romano is very interested in strengthening ties between your families, the messenger was saying. His voice was smooth, professional. He believes that a marriage alliance would benefit both territories significantly. He's prepared to offer very generous terms. Is he? Salvatore's tone was amused, condescending. And what makes young Romano think I'm interested in aligning with his family? I have other arrangements in progress. Mr. Romano is aware of your negotiations with Don Marchetti. A pause. He believes his offer is superior. Does he now? The Romano territory includes the northern shipping routes, the warehouse district, and exclusive contracts with 3 major labor unions. A partnership would give you access to all of that. Additionally, Mr. Romano is willing to discuss profit-sharing arrangements that would significantly increase your annual revenue. Arya could practically hear her father's greed sharpening. Furthermore, the messenger continued, Mr. Romano would like to extend a personal invitation to you and your daughters to visit his estate this weekend. He believes that meeting in person would allow for more productive negotiations. He's prepared to host you as his guests, demonstrate his holdings, and discuss terms in detail. Silence. Arya held her breath. Both daughters? Salvatore asked. Yes, sir. Mr. Romano understands you have 2 unmarried daughters. He'd like to meet them both before any decisions are made. More silence. Arya's heart pounded. Tell Romano I'll consider his invitation, Salvatore finally said. I'll send word by tomorrow. The messenger left. Arya stayed frozen by the vent, her mind racing. This was it. This was the chance. If they could get to Romano's estate, if they could meet him in person, maybe, just maybe, there was a way to shift her father's decision away from Marchetti and toward Romano. At the very least, it would buy them time. But she had to be smart about this, had to think several moves ahead, the way her father's enemies did, the way her father did. Plus, absolutely not. Lena's voice was firm, her arms crossed, her expression more resolute than Arya had seen it in years. They were in Arya's bedroom this time, late at night, speaking in whispers even though the walls were thick and the guards were outside. "Lena, listen to me." "No, you listen to me." Lena's eyes were fierce. "I know what you're thinking. I can see it written all over your face. You're planning to offer yourself instead of me." Arya didn't deny it. Couldn't. "You can't," Lena continued, her voice breaking. "You can't sacrifice yourself for me. It's not fair. It's not right." "Life isn't fair," Arya said quietly. "You know that. That doesn't mean you have to throw yourself away." "I'm not throwing myself away. I'm making a choice." Arya reached for her sister's hands. "Lena, you're gentle. You're kind. You still see good in people. Marchetti would destroy that. Romano might too. But I'm different. I'm harder. I can handle it." "You shouldn't have to handle it." "But I can." Arya squeezed her sister's hands. "And you can't. I've watched you these past 2 days, and you're barely sleeping, barely eating. You're terrified, and you should be, but I'm not. I'm angry, and anger is useful." Lena was crying again. "You deserve to be happy too. You deserve to choose your own life." "Maybe. But right now, this is the choice I'm making." Arya's voice was steady. "Romano invited both of us to his estate. Papa will bring us both. And when we get there, you're going to refuse Romano. You're going to make it very clear that you have no interest in marrying him." "But Papa will be furious. Papa will be embarrassed, yes, but he won't punish you in front of Romano. That would make him look weak, like he can't control his own daughter. And Romano can't force a woman who's openly refusing him, not without looking like a tyrant." Lena was shaking her head, but Arya could see the understanding dawning. "And when you refuse," Arya continued, "I'll step forward. I'll express interest. I'll give Papa a way to save face, his older daughter showing proper respect and ambition. He'll spin it as his plan all along, and Romano will get his alliance. And you'll get a husband you don't want." "I'll get you free from Marchetti," Arya corrected. "That's all that matters." Lena pulled her hands away, pacing to the window. "What if Romano is worse than we think? What if he's cruel? What if he hurts you?" "Then I'll survive it." Arya's voice was harder now. "I've survived Papa my whole life. I can survive Romano." "That's not surviving. That's just existing in pain." "Then I'll exist in pain and you'll be safe. That's enough for me." Lena turned from the window, her face streaked with tears. "I hate this. I hate all of this. I hate Papa for doing this to us. I hate that we don't have any real choices. I hate that you think sacrificing yourself is the only option." "So do I," Arya admitted. "But this is the world we live in, and in this world, sometimes the only power we have is choosing which cage we walk into." The drive to Dominic Romano's estate took 3 hours, winding through countryside that gradually shifted from farmland to rolling hills covered in vineyards. The estate itself sat on a hilltop, a sprawling Tuscan-style villa surrounded by cypress trees and manicured grounds. It was beautiful. Arya hated that she noticed. Salvatore sat in the front of the car, already on his third phone call of the drive, barking orders about territory disputes and shipment schedules. Beside Arya, Lena was pale and quiet, her hands clasped so tightly in her lap that her knuckles were white. "Remember the plan," Arya whispered. Lena nodded, not trusting herself to speak. The car pulled up to the main entrance, where a small staff waited to greet them. A woman in her 50s, elegant and professional, stepped forward. "Mr. Valenti, welcome. I'm Teresa, Mr. Romano's house manager. He's expecting you in the East Salon. Please follow me." They were led through halls decorated with art that was probably worth more than most people earned in a lifetime. Everything was tasteful, expensive, understated in the way that only truly wealthy people achieved. No ostentation, no gold-plated excess, just quiet, absolute power. The East Salon was a sun-filled room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the vineyards. And standing by those windows, hands in his pockets, was Dominic Romano. He was younger than Arya expected, though she'd known he was only 30. Tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair and darker eyes that swept over their party with the kind of assessment that missed nothing. He wore a simple white shirt and dark slacks. No suit, no tie, no need to prove himself. "Salvatore." His voice was deep, measured. He crossed to shake her father's hand. "Thank you for accepting my invitation." "Romano." Salvatore's handshake was firm, competitive. "You have a beautiful home. It serves its purpose." Dominic's attention shifted to Arya and Lena, "And these must be your daughters." His gaze lingered on each of them for just a moment, long enough to be polite, not long enough to be presumptuous. Arya felt the weight of that assessment and kept her expression neutral. "Arya," Salvatore said, gesturing carelessly, "my eldest, and Lena, the youngest. It's a pleasure to meet you both." Dominic inclined his head slightly. "I hope the drive wasn't too tiresome." It was fine, Arya said when it became clear neither her father nor her sister was going to respond. Dominic's eyes returned to her, and for just a second she saw something that might have been interest, or curiosity, or calculation. Please sit, he said, gesturing to the arranged furniture. Teresa will bring refreshments. I thought we could speak informally before dinner. The next hour was a masterclass in negotiation. Salvatore postured and probed, trying to find weaknesses in Romano's position. Dominic remained calm, answering questions with the kind of precision that revealed he'd anticipated every single one. He talked about his territories, his businesses, his vision for expansion. He spoke about loyalty, about building something that would last beyond one generation. And all the while, Arya watched him. He was smart, that was obvious. But there was something else, a kind of controlled intensity, like a blade held perfectly still. He smiled when appropriate, made small jokes, played the gracious host. But underneath, she sensed something far more dangerous. This was a man who had built an empire before he was 30, a man who had crushed rivals and expanded territory and made older, more established bosses respect him. This was a man who did not lose. I understand you have another arrangement in progress, Dominic said eventually, his tone casual. With Don Marchetti, Salvatore's expression tightened. You seem well informed. I make it my business to be informed. Dominic leaned back in his chair. Marchetti is old guard, powerful in his way, but his methods are outdated and his territory is in decline. An alliance with him might seem stable, but stability isn't the same as growth. And you offer growth? I offer partnership, real partnership, where both families benefit equally. Marchetti wants a wife to control. I want an ally to build with. His eyes moved to Lena, then to Arya. There's a difference. Salvatore followed his gaze. You've met my daughters. What do you think? The question was crass, treating them like livestock at auction. Arya's jaw tightened, but Dominic's response surprised her. I think, he said slowly, that what I think doesn't matter nearly as much as what they think. I'm proposing a marriage alliance, not a purchase. The woman who agrees to this will be my wife, my partner. She deserves to have a choice in the matter. Salvatore laughed, sharp and mocking. A choice? You're soft, Romano. Women don't need choices. They need to understand their duty. Perhaps. Dominic's voice was cool now, a subtle shift that made Arya's attention sharpen. But I've found that women who choose their positions are far more effective allies than women who are forced into them. Resentment breeds betrayal. Partnership breeds loyalty. Pretty words. Practical words. Dominic stood. If you'll excuse me for a moment, I need to take a call. Teresa will show you to your rooms. I've had sweets prepared for each of you. We'll continue this discussion over dinner. He left without waiting for permission, and Arya realized what she'd just witnessed. Dominic Romano had just put her father in his place without raising his voice or making a single threat. He'd simply made it clear that this was his territory, his home, his rules. And Salvatore, for once, had nothing to say. The suite they'd given Arya was more luxurious than her bedroom at home. A 4-poster bed with silk sheets, a sitting area with a fireplace, a balcony overlooking the gardens, fresh flowers on the nightstand, a bathroom with a tub the size of a small pool. It was a gilded cage. But then, she was used to those. She'd barely finished unpacking when there was a knock at her door. Lena slipped inside, her eyes wide. Did you see him? Of course I saw him. I was sitting right there. No, I mean, really see him. Lena sank onto the edge of the bed. He's not what I expected. What did you expect? Someone like Papa, I guess? Or like Marchetti? Cold, cruel. But he wasn't. He was almost respectful? Almost, Arya agreed. But don't mistake manners for safety. He's still dangerous. Maybe more dangerous than the others because he's smart enough to hide it. Lena was quiet for a moment. Are you sure you want to do this? Are you sure you want to marry Marchetti? That's not fair. It's reality. Arya moved to the balcony, looking out over the vineyards. The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. We stick to the plan. At dinner, when the subject comes up, you refuse. Make it clear. Then I step in. What if he doesn't want you? The question landed like a blow, even though Arya had asked herself the same thing 100 times. Then we'll figure something else out, she said with more confidence than she felt. But one way or another, you're not marrying Marchetti. I promised you that. Dinner was held in a formal dining room with a table long enough to seat 20, though tonight it was set for just 4. Candles flickered in silver holders. Wine that probably cost more than a car sat breathing in crystal decanters. Arya wore a simple black dress, elegant but not showy. Lena wore pale blue that made her look even younger than she was. Salvatore was in one of his expensive suits, all flash and no substance. and Dominic Romano sat at the head of the table in dark slacks and a crisp white shirt, looking like he owned the world, which, in many ways, he did. The first course was served, some kind of delicate seafood dish that Arya barely tasted. Conversation flowed around business and territories, alliances and opportunities. Her father was enjoying himself, clearly pleased by the quality of the meal and the attention. Finally, over the main course, Dominic set down his wine glass and addressed the elephant in the room. Salvatore, I'd like to be direct. I've enjoyed our discussions about business, but the real reason I invited you here was to propose a marriage alliance. I'd like to know if you're interested in pursuing that arrangement. Salvatore dabbed at his mouth with his napkin. Depends on the terms. The terms are generous. A full partnership between our families, shared territories in the northern districts, joint ventures in shipping and real estate, and in exchange, I would marry one of your daughters, uniting our families formally. Just one? Salvatore's tone was mocking. I have two, as you can see. I'm aware. Dominic's eyes moved between Arya and Lena. I wanted to meet them both before making any assumptions about which would be the better match. This was it. This was the moment. Arya felt her heartbeat accelerate, but she kept her face calm. Well? Salvatore looked at his daughters. What do you think? Which of you wants to marry Romano here? The question was designed to humiliate them, to force them to compete. Arya saw Lena's hands clench in her lap. I don't. Lena's voice was quiet but clear. Salvatore's head snapped toward her. What? I don't want to marry Mr. Romano. Lena lifted her chin, her eyes meeting Dominic's. I'm sure he's a good man, but I don't want to marry him. I'm sorry. The silence that followed was deadly. Salvatore's face turned red. You ungrateful little... Salvatore. Dominic's voice cut through the building rage like a knife. She has the right to refuse. I told you, I want a willing partner, not a prisoner. She doesn't get to refuse. I'm her father. You decide many things, I'm sure. But this? Dominic's tone was ice. This is between me and the woman I would marry. If she doesn't want me, I don't want her. It's that simple. Arya watched her father struggle with his fury, watched him try to find a way to reassert control. This was going exactly as she'd hoped. Dominic was making it clear that forcing Lena would end the alliance, and Salvatore wanted this alliance. She could see it in the calculations running behind his eyes, the way he was weighing profit against pride. She had to move now, before he found a way to twist this back around. I'll do it. 3 pairs of eyes turned to her. Arya kept her voice steady, her expression composed. I'll marry you, Mr. Romano, if you're amenable to it. Salvatore's eyes narrowed. Arya, it makes sense, doesn't it, Papa? She turned to her father, playing the role of dutiful daughter. Lena is younger, softer, better suited to a different kind of match. But I understand what this alliance means for the family. I understand what's being offered, and I'm willing. It was exactly the right thing to say. Salvatore's expression shifted from fury to calculation. She could practically see him rewriting the narrative in his head. This had been his plan all along, his clever eldest daughter showing proper ambition while his foolish youngest proved herself unworthy. Well, he said slowly, it seems Arya has more sense than her sister. Dominic hadn't taken his eyes off her. You're sure? I'm sure. This isn't a decision to make lightly. I don't make any decisions lightly, Mr. Romano. Arya met his gaze without flinching. I know exactly what I'm agreeing to. For a long moment, he studied her. She couldn't read his expression, couldn't tell what he was thinking, but she didn't look away. Finally, he nodded. Then I accept. Salvatore, it seems we have an agreement. Her father was already reaching for his wine glass, ready to toast. 2 new alliances! But Dominic held up a hand. One moment. He looked at Arya again. I'd like to speak with you privately, if you're willing. It wasn't really a question, but it was phrased like one. Another test, maybe. Of course, Arya said. Salvatore frowned. Now? Now, Dominic confirmed. We have details to discuss. Teresa will show you and Lena to the library. There's an excellent whiskey collection I think you'll appreciate. He was giving orders in his own house, and there was nothing Salvatore could do but comply. Arya watched her father struggle with it, then force a smile. Fine, but don't take too long. We have terms to negotiate. Of course. Teresa appeared as if summoned, guiding Salvatore and a wide-eyed Lena from the dining room. And then it was just Arya and Dominic Romano, alone in the candlelight. He pushed back from the table and stood. Walk with me? She followed him through French doors onto a terrace overlooking the gardens. The night air was cool, scented with jasmine and rosemary. Stars scattered across the sky like diamonds on black velvet. Dominic walked to the stone railing and leaned against it, his posture relaxed. But Arya could sense the coiled tension underneath. "You didn't have to do that," he said finally. "Do what?" "Offer yourself to save your sister." So he'd seen through it. She shouldn't be surprised. "You're right," Arya said. "I didn't have to. I chose to." "Why?" "Because Lena is gentle and kind, and this world will destroy those qualities. Because my father was going to marry her off to Carlo Marchetti, and Marchetti would have broken her. Because someone had to make a choice, and I was the only one who could." She didn't mention the fear, the desperation, the absolute certainty that she would do anything, marry anyone, to keep her sister safe. Dominic was quiet, watching her. "You're protecting her." "I'm her older sister. That's what I do." "Even if it means sacrificing yourself?" "I'm not sacrificing myself. I'm making a strategic decision." Arya turned to face him fully. "You wanted a partnership, didn't you? Someone who understands this life?" "I understand it better than Lena ever could. I know what it means to be a wife in this world. I know how to navigate the politics, the alliances, the games." "You know how to survive," Dominic said softly. "Yes." He moved closer, and Arya had to fight the urge to step back. He was taller than she'd realized, and there was something about him that made the air feel heavier. "Let me be very clear about something," he said. "I don't want a wife who's terrified of me. I don't want someone who flinches when I walk into a room. I want a partner, someone who can stand beside me, not cower behind me." "I don't cower." "No," he agreed, a slight smile touching his lips. "You don't. That's why I'm accepting your offer instead of your sister's refusal." "So we have an understanding?" "Almost." His eyes held hers. "But I need you to understand something too. I'm not a good man, Arya. I've done things that would make your father look like a saint. I'm ruthless when I need to be, and I don't forgive betrayal. But I'm also loyal to the people who are loyal to me. If you become my wife, I will protect you. I will respect you. I will never raise a hand to you, but I will also expect the same loyalty I give." It was the most honest thing anyone in this world had ever said to her. "I can live with that," Arya said. "Can you?" "Because once this is done, there's no going back. You'll be mine, Arya Valenti, and I protect what's mine." The way he said it sent a shiver down her spine. Not from fear, from something else entirely. Something she wasn't ready to examine. "I understand," she said. He held out his hand. "Then we have a deal." She looked at his hand, then at his face. In his eyes, she saw calculation. Yes. Ambition, danger, but also something that might have been respect. She took his hand. His grip was firm, warm. "We have a deal," she agreed. And just like that, Arya Valenti sealed her fate. The wedding happened fast. Too fast for second thoughts, which Arya suspected was exactly how Dominic had planned it. 3 weeks after that dinner on the terrace, she stood in a private chapel on the Romano estate wearing a dress that cost more than most cars. Ivory silk that draped like water, delicate lace at the shoulders, a train that whispered against marble floors. Her father had wanted something ostentatious, dripping with crystals and excess. Dominic had quietly overruled him, sending his own stylist with instructions for elegance, not spectacle. It was the first sign that her life was changing in ways she hadn't anticipated. The guest list was small, just family and the most important associates. Salvatore sat in the front row looking smug, already counting the profits this alliance would bring. Lena sat beside him, her eyes red from crying, though she'd smiled when she'd helped Arya dress that morning. "You look beautiful," Lena had whispered, fastening the tiny buttons at Arya's wrists. "Like a princess." "Princesses in fairy tales marry for love," Arya had replied. "This is different. Maybe it doesn't have to be." But Arya knew better than to hope for fairy tales. Now she walked down the aisle alone. Her father hadn't earned the right to give her away. Her eyes fixed on the man waiting at the altar. Dominic wore a black suit that fit him perfectly, his dark hair slicked back, his expression unreadable. He watched her approach with the same intense focus he'd turned on her that night on the terrace, and Arya felt that strange shiver again. Fear, she told herself, just fear. The ceremony was brief, traditional, words spoken in Latin that bound them together in the eyes of the church and the law. When the priest instructed Dominic to kiss his bride, he'd leaned in slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted. She didn't. His lips touched hers softly, briefly. A claim, but a gentle one. When he pulled back, his eyes searched hers for just a moment before he turned to face their guests. "Ladies and gentlemen," the priest announced, "I present to you Mr. and Mrs. Dominic Romano." Applause filled the chapel. Arya's hand was tucked into the crook of Dominic's arm, and as they walked back down the aisle together, she caught sight of her father's face. He was smiling, triumphant. He thought he'd won. Thought he'd secured his alliance and maintained control over his daughter. He had no idea he'd just lost her completely. The reception was held in the estate's ballroom, a soaring space with crystal chandeliers and windows that overlooked the vineyards. Champagne flowed freely. A string quartet played music that was supposed to be romantic. Important men in expensive suits congratulated Dominic, their eyes sliding over Arya with appraisal and sometimes envy. She smiled when expected, made polite conversation, played her part. But all the while she was aware of Dominic beside her, his hand occasionally settling at the small of her back, a gesture that was possessive and reassuring in equal measure. "You're doing well," he murmured during a lull in the endless stream of well-wishers. "Did you think I wouldn't?" "I think you're stronger than you let people see." His eyes found hers. "That's smart in this world, but you don't have to hide it from me." Before she could respond, Salvatore appeared with a glass of whiskey in hand, his cheeks flushed from alcohol and satisfaction. "Romano, a word!" Dominic's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Of course." He glanced at Arya. "I'll be right back." She watched him follow her father toward a quieter corner, watched the way Salvatore's gestures became more expansive, more demanding. Whatever he was saying, Dominic's expression remained neutral, but there was a tension in his shoulders that hadn't been there moments before. "He looks ready to kill someone." Arya turned to find a woman standing beside her, elegant in a deep green dress, probably in her mid-30s with sharp eyes and an amused smile. "Excuse me?" "Your husband." The woman nodded toward Dominic. "He has that look. I've seen it before. Usually right before someone ends up in the hospital." "And you are?" "Isabella Moretti. My husband runs the territory south of here. We're friendly with the Romanos. Well, as friendly as anyone gets in this business." She sipped her champagne. "You're Arya, obviously. The brave one who volunteered." Arya's spine stiffened. "I don't know what you mean." "Please. Everyone knows your father was planning to marry your sister off to Marchetti. Then suddenly, you show up here and offer yourself to Romano instead. It's either very brave or very stupid. I haven't decided which yet." "Does it matter?" Isabella laughed. "I like you already. Most of the wives in this world are either terrified mice or social climbing vipers. You seem like neither. What am I then?" "A survivor." Isabella's eyes were knowing. "Like me. Word of advice?" "Dominic is one of the better ones. He's ruthless, yes. Dangerous, absolutely. But he's also loyal and surprisingly fair. Treat him with respect, and he'll give you more freedom than most wives in our world ever see. And if I don't, then you'll learn very quickly why everyone fears him." Isabella set down her empty glass. "But something tells me you're smart enough not to test that particular boundary. Good luck, Arya Romano. You're going to need it." She disappeared into the crowd, leaving Arya with more questions than answers. Across the room, Salvatore was still talking, his voice rising. Dominic finally cut him off with a few quiet words that made her father's face go red. Then Dominic was walking back toward her, his expression smooth but his eyes hard. "What did he want?" Arya asked when he reached her. "To remind me that you're still his daughter, that he expects to maintain influence over you." Dominic's hand found hers, his fingers lacing through hers in a gesture that looked affectionate but felt like a statement. "I corrected that misconception." "How?" "I told him that as of today, you're a Romano, which means you answer to me, not him, and if he has a problem with that, we can discuss it privately." The way he said privately made it clear what that discussion would entail. Arya should have been angry at being discussed like property, but instead she felt something that might have been relief. Her father's control had been a chain around her neck her entire life. If trading that for Dominic's authority meant Salvatore lost his power over her, she'd take it. "He won't like that," she said. "I don't particularly care what he likes." Dominic turned to face her fully, his free hand coming up to cup her jaw gently. To anyone watching, it would look like a tender moment between newlyweds. "You're mine now, Arya. That means I protect you, even from your own father." The words should have frightened her. Instead, they settled something deep in her chest that had been unsettled for as long as she could remember. "Okay," she whispered. His thumb brushed across her cheekbone. "Okay," he echoed. Then louder. "I think it's time we said goodnight to our guests." The ride to their private wing of the estate was silent. Arya's heart hammered against her ribs, her hands clenched in her lap. She knew what came next, knew what was expected on a wedding night. Dominic walked beside her down the long hallway, his hand at her back again. When they reached the suite that would now be theirs, he opened the door and gestured for her to enter first. The room was beautiful, soft lighting, rose petals scattered across the bed, champagne chilling in a bucket. All the romantic touches that were supposed to make this night special. Arya stood in the center of the room, her back to him, trying to steady her breathing. She heard the door close, heard his footsteps approaching. "Arya." She turned. He'd removed his jacket, loosened his tie. In the soft light, he looked younger, less intimidating, almost human. "I'm not going to touch you tonight," he said. She blinked. "What?" "You married me to save your sister. You made a sacrifice, and I respect that. But I'm not going to compound that sacrifice by forcing you into my bed before you're ready." He moved to the champagne, pouring 2 glasses. "We have time. There's no rush." Arya's mind was reeling. "But people can expect whatever they want. This is between us." He handed her a glass. "I told you I wanted a partner, not a prisoner. Partners build trust, and trust takes time." She took the champagne, her hands shaking slightly. "I don't understand you." "But what's to understand?" "You're not what I expected." A slight smile touched his lips. "What did you expect?" "Someone like my father. Someone who would take what they wanted and not care about the cost." "I'm not your father, Arya, and I do care about the cost, especially when that cost is your trust." He raised his glass. "To new beginnings." She clinked her glass against his, the crystal singing softly. "To new beginnings." They stood there in the candlelight, drinking champagne, and for the first time since she'd agreed to this marriage, Arya felt something that might have been hope. The next morning, Arya woke in the massive bed alone. The sheets beside her were disturbed. Dominic had slept there, but he was gone now. Sunlight streamed through the windows, and for a moment she just lay there, trying to orient herself to this new reality. She was married. She was Arya Romano now, and somehow, impossibly, she'd survived her wedding night without any of the horrors she'd imagined. A knock at the door made her sit up. "Come in?" Teresa, the house manager, entered with a breakfast tray. "Good morning, Mrs. Romano. Mr. Romano asked me to let you sleep, but he wanted to make sure you had breakfast when you woke." Mrs. Romano. The title still felt foreign. "Where is he?" "In his office. He has meetings this morning." Teresa set the tray on the bedside table. "He said to tell you that you're welcome to join him when you're ready, or you're free to explore the house and grounds as you like. Whatever you prefer." Freedom. Another unexpected gift. "Thank you, Teresa." The woman smiled. "If you need anything, just ring. And welcome to the family, dear. It's nice to have a lady of the house again." After Teresa left, Arya picked at the breakfast. Fresh fruit, pastries, coffee, that was better than anything she'd had at her father's house. Then she showered, dressed in casual clothes from the wardrobe that had been stocked for her, and set out to explore her new home. The estate was massive. She wandered through libraries and sitting rooms, a music room with a grand piano, a conservatory filled with exotic plants. Everything was beautiful, expensive, maintained with meticulous care, but it was still a cage, just a more gilded one. She found herself in the gardens, following a stone path through rose bushes and lavender. The morning air was cool, scented with earth and flowers. Birds sang in the trees. It was peaceful in a way her father's estate never had been. "You're up early." She turned to find Dominic approaching from a side path, dressed in dark slacks and a gray shirt, his hair slightly disheveled from the wind. "I wanted to see the grounds," she said. "What do you think?" "It's beautiful. Very different from what I'm used to." He fell into step beside her. "Your father's estate always felt like a fortress to me. High walls, armed guards everywhere. This is meant to feel like a home." "Does it feel like home?" He was quiet for a moment. "It's starting to. Especially now." The words hung between them, heavy with meaning she wasn't ready to unpack. They walked in silence for a while, following the path deeper into the gardens. Finally, Dominic spoke again. "I have something for you." He pulled a small box from his pocket. "I was going to give it to you last night, but the timing didn't feel right." Arya took the box, opening it to reveal a key on a simple silver chain. "It's for the East Wing Library," Dominic explained. "I noticed you looking at the books yesterday. That library is private, my personal collection. No one else has access, but I thought you might enjoy it." It was such a small thing, just a key. But it felt like more than that, like trust, like he was giving her a piece of himself. "Thank you," she said softly. "There's also this." He pulled out a phone, new, expensive. "Your own number, not monitored, not controlled. You can call whoever you want, whenever you want." Arya stared at the phone. At her father's house, all calls were monitored, all communications controlled. This was freedom she'd never had. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. "Because I meant what I said. I want a partner, not a prisoner." He met her eyes. "And because I know what it's like to feel trapped. My father controlled every aspect of my life until he died. I won't do that to you." She wanted to believe him, but trust was a luxury she'd never been able to afford. "What do you want from me in return?" she asked. "Honesty, loyalty, time." He stepped closer. "I'm not asking you to love me, Arya. I'm not even asking you to like me. But I am asking you to give this a real chance. Give us a chance." Looking up at him in the morning light, seeing the earnestness in his eyes, Arya made a decision. Okay, she said. I'll try. His smile was small but genuine. That's all I ask. 2 days later, the first test came. Arya was having coffee in the morning room when Teresa appeared, her expression troubled. Mrs. Romano, your father is here. He's demanding to see you. Arya's hands tightened on her cup. Where's Dominic? In the city, meeting with his attorneys. He won't be back until this afternoon. Of course. Salvatore had probably timed this deliberately. Tell him I'll be there in a moment. She found him in the main salon, pacing like a caged animal. When he saw her, his expression was thunderous. Finally! I've been waiting 20 minutes. I wasn't aware you were coming. Arya kept her voice level. You should have called ahead. I shouldn't have to make appointments to see my own daughter. I'm not your daughter anymore. I'm Dominic's wife. The slap came fast, snapping her head to the side. Pain exploded across her cheek, but Arya didn't cry out. She'd learned long ago that showing pain only encouraged him. You'll always be my daughter, Salvatore snarled, and you'll show me respect. Romano isn't here to protect you now. Arya's cheek throbbed, but she kept her expression neutral. What do you want? I want you to remember where you came from. I want you to remember that I made this alliance, that you're here because I allow it. He grabbed her arm, his fingers digging in hard enough to bruise. And I want you to convince your husband to give me access to his shipping routes. I've asked twice, and he keeps putting me off. Maybe because he doesn't trust you. Another slap, harder this time. Arya tasted blood. Watch your mouth. You're going to talk to Romano. You're going to use whatever influence you have. Because if you don't, I'll make sure Lena pays the price. Marchetti is still interested, you know. One word from me, you won't touch Lena. Salvatore laughed. Won't I? You're not there to protect her anymore, and I can do whatever I want with my own daughter. Fear shot through her. Not for herself, for Lena, still trapped in her father's house. I'll talk to him, Arya said quietly, but I can't promise anything. Then you'd better be very convincing. Salvatore released her arm, shoving her back slightly. I'll be in touch. And Arya, don't tell Romano about this visit. Men don't like wives who can't handle family matters on their own. He left, and Arya sank onto the sofa, her hands shaking. Her cheek was on fire, her arm aching where he'd grabbed her. But worse than the physical pain was the fear. Lena. She had to protect Lena. Mrs. Romano? Teresa stood in the doorway, her face pale. I'm sorry, I tried to tell him to wait, but he pushed past me. She stopped, seeing Arya's face. Oh dear. Let me get some ice. No. Arya stood on unsteady legs. I'm fine. You're bleeding. Arya touched her lip, felt the split where her father's ring had caught. It's nothing. But Teresa was already leaving, returning moments later with ice wrapped in a soft cloth and a first aid kit. Sit, she ordered gently. Let me help. Arya sat, too tired to argue. Teresa dabbed at her lip with surprising gentleness, applied ice to her cheek. This isn't the first time, is it? Teresa asked quietly. Arya didn't answer. Mr. Romano needs to know, Teresa continued. He won't tolerate this. No. The word came out sharper than intended. He can't know. It'll cause problems between the families. It'll show your father that you're protected now, that he can't just walk in here and hurt you anymore. Teresa's eyes were fierce. Salvatore Valenti is a bully, and bullies only understand one thing, strength. Mister, Romano has that strength. Please. Arya caught Teresa's hand. Don't tell him. I need to handle this myself. Teresa looked like she wanted to argue, but finally nodded. For now. But if it happens again, I won't keep quiet. Arya spent the rest of the day in her room, icing her face, trying to figure out what to do. She couldn't ask Dominic for access to his shipping routes. That was business, and she had no right to interfere. But she also couldn't let her father threaten Lena. By the time Dominic returned that evening, the swelling had gone down enough that makeup could mostly hide it. She joined him for dinner, grateful for the dim candlelight. How was your day? He asked, pouring wine. Quiet. I read in the library. Not entirely a lie. She had spent some time there, trying to distract herself. Yours? Productive. We're finalizing a new contract with the Port Authority. Should increase revenue significantly. He studied her across the table. Are you all right? You seem tense. I'm fine, just adjusting to everything. He didn't look convinced, but he didn't push. They ate in comfortable silence, discussing neutral topics, books, the gardens, plans for updating some of the guest rooms. It was almost normal, almost peaceful. Until Dominic set down his fork and said, Teresa told me about your father's visit. Arya's blood turned to ice. She promised not to tell me he hurt you. She kept that promise. But she did mention he was here. Dominic's eyes were hard. Why didn't you tell me? It wasn't important. Your father showing up at my home unannounced is absolutely important. He leaned back in his chair, his gaze never leaving her face. What did he want? Arya weighed her options. Lying would only make things worse. Access to your shipping routes. And what did you tell him? That I'd talk to you, but that I couldn't promise anything. Dominic was quiet for a long moment. He threatened you, didn't he? Threatened to hurt you or Lena if you didn't convince me. She didn't answer, which was answer enough. Look at me. Slowly, Arya lifted her eyes to his. From now on, when your father contacts you, you tell me immediately. You don't handle him alone. You don't make promises you can't keep, and you sure as hell don't let him threaten you. His voice was steel. Is that clear? He'll hurt Lena. He won't touch Lena. I'll make sure of it. How? Dominic pulled out his phone, made a call. Marco, I need you to pick someone up. Lena Valenti. She's at the Valenti estate. Bring her here. I don't care what her father says. Tell him she's visiting her sister. If he objects, remind him who has the real power in this alliance. Good. I'll expect you within the hour. He ended the call and looked at Arya. Lena will be here tonight. She can stay as long as she wants, and your father can go to hell. Arya felt tears burning behind her eyes. You didn't have to. Yes, I did. She's your sister. That makes her family, and I protect my family. He stood, moving around the table to where she sat. Gently, he tilted her face up toward the light. His expression went cold when he saw the bruise she'd tried to hide. He hit you. It wasn't a question. It's nothing I'm not used to. That doesn't make it acceptable. Dominic's jaw was tight with barely controlled rage. No one touches what's mine. No one. Not even your father. What are you going to do? What I should have done the moment he made the first threat. He pulled out his phone again. From now on, Salvatore Valenti will communicate with me only through intermediaries. He's not welcome on this property. And if he ever lays a hand on you or Lena again, I'll make him regret it. That'll start a war. Then we'll have a war. But I won't tolerate him abusing my wife. His hand gentled on her face, his thumb brushing carefully over her unbruised cheek. You don't have to be afraid anymore, Arya. You're safe here. Both of you are. And looking up at him, seeing the fierce protectiveness in his eyes, Arya realized something terrifying. She was starting to believe him. An hour later, Lena arrived in tears, throwing herself into Arya's arms the moment she cleared the door. I was so scared, she sobbed. Papa was furious when Dominic's men showed up. He tried to stop them, but they said they had orders. They said I was coming here, and he couldn't refuse. Arya, what's happening? Arya held her sister tight, looking over her shoulder at Dominic, who stood in the doorway watching them with an unreadable expression. You're safe now, Arya said. That's all that matters. And for the first time in her life, she meant it. Over the next 6 weeks, Arya watched her sister bloom like a flower that had finally found sunlight. Lena laughed more, slept better, stopped flinching at loud noises or unexpected movements. The constant fear that had shadowed her eyes began to fade, replaced by something Arya had almost forgotten existed. Hope. Dominic had given Lena her own suite in the East Wing, treated her with the same courteous respect he showed Arya, and made it clear to everyone in his organization that both Valenti sisters were under his protection. When Salvatore called demanding Lena's return, Dominic had been brutally direct. She's visiting her sister, indefinitely. If you have a problem with that, we can renegotiate our entire alliance. Your choice. Salvatore had backed down. He always did when faced with real power. But Arya knew her father, knew that his silence wasn't acceptance. It was strategy. He was waiting, calculating, looking for the perfect moment to reassert control. She just didn't know when that moment would come. In the meantime, life at the Romano estate settled into an unexpected rhythm. Mornings were quiet. Dominic was usually up before dawn, already in his office or on calls with associates across different time zones. Arya had started joining him for coffee around 8, sitting in the leather chair across from his desk while he worked, reading or occasionally offering observations about things she'd overheard from the household staff. He'd been surprised the first time she'd mentioned that one of his captains was skimming money from the gambling operations. How do you know that? He'd asked, setting down his pen. His wife was complaining to Teresa about needing to hide jewelry purchases from the accountants. She was very specific about the amounts. I did the math. There's no way their legitimate income covers those expenses. Dominic had stared at her for a long moment, then smiled slowly. You're observant. I've had to be. Good. Keep watching, keep listening. You see things I might miss. He'd leaned forward. That's what I meant about partnership. You understand people in ways I don't. Use that. It was the first time he treated her like an actual asset rather than just an acquisition. The first time anyone had valued her mind instead of just her family name. After that, their morning coffee sessions became strategy meetings. He'd discuss business challenges, and she'd offer insights based on the complex social dynamics she'd spent her whole life navigating. She understood motivations, read people's fears and desires, saw the hidden currents beneath surface conversations. And Dominic listened. Actually listened, then acted on her advice. It was intoxicating being valued like that. Being powerful in a way she'd never been allowed before. Their relationship was shifting too, in small ways that felt significant. He'd started touching her more. Nothing inappropriate, just casual contact. A hand at her back when they walked together, fingers brushing hers when he handed her coffee, his jacket draped over her shoulders when they sat on the terrace in the evening air. And at night, they still shared a bed, though nothing had happened beyond sleep. He'd kept his word about not forcing intimacy, but the space between them seemed to shrink a little more each night. Sometimes she'd wake to find his arm across her waist, or she'd drift off with her head accidentally resting against his shoulder. It felt dangerous, like standing at the edge of a cliff, knowing one wrong step would send her tumbling into something she couldn't control. But it also felt safe in a way nothing else in her life ever had. One morning in early October, Arya woke to find Dominic already dressed, standing at the window with his phone pressed to his ear. His voice was low, tense. I don't care what he's offering. The answer is no. Because I don't trust him. Fine. Set up a meeting. But not here. Neutral ground. He ended the call and turned, noticing she was awake. Sorry. Didn't mean to wake you. What's wrong? Arya sat up, pulling the sheets around her. That sounded serious. Dominic was quiet for a moment, clearly weighing what to tell her. Then he sat on the edge of the bed, his expression troubled. Your father wants a meeting, says he has a proposition that would benefit both families. Arya's stomach dropped. You're not actually considering it. I have to at least hear him out. Refusing outright would be seen as disrespect, which could fracture the alliance completely. But I don't like it. He reached out, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. He's planning something. I just don't know what yet. Nothing good. He doesn't make propositions. He makes demands and calls them opportunities. I know. That's why I'm meeting him somewhere public, with witnesses. He can't try anything too overt. Dominic's eyes searched hers. I need you to do something for me. What? Stay here. Keep Lena close. And if anything feels wrong, if anyone unfamiliar shows up, if you get any weird calls, anything, you call Marco immediately. He'll be here with a full security detail while I'm gone. Fear prickled down Arya's spine. You think he'd try something here? I think your father is desperate and angry, which makes him unpredictable. And I'd rather be overly cautious than leave you vulnerable. He was really worried. She could see it in the tension around his eyes, the way his jaw was set. Be careful, she said softly. His hand cupped her face, thumb brushing her cheekbone. Always am, but it's nice to have someone worry about me for once. He leaned in slowly, giving her time to pull away. When she didn't, his lips touched her forehead in a gentle kiss that felt more intimate than anything that had come before. Then he was gone, and Arya was left sitting in bed with her heart racing and her thoughts spinning. The meeting was set for 2 that afternoon at a restaurant in the city that was known for being neutral ground, owned by a family that had no allegiances to anyone, used specifically for this kind of negotiation. Dominic left with Marco and 3 other men, all armed, all alert. Arya tried to distract herself. She had lunch with Lena on the terrace, discussing a proposal Dominic had made the day before about finding Lena a suitable husband, someone kind, someone who would treat her well. He'd already identified 3 candidates, all younger sons of allied families, all reportedly decent men. You don't have to decide now, Arya had said. Take your time. Meet them. See what feels right. What if nothing feels right? Lena had asked. What if I don't want to get married at all? Then don't. Dominic said you can stay here as long as you want. But eventually I'll have to figure out my own life. I can't hide behind you forever. The conversation had left Arya unsettled, thinking about choices and freedom and the limited options women in their world actually had. By 3 o'clock, she was pacing the library, unable to focus on anything. The meeting should be over by now. Dominic should have called. Her phone rang at 3:15. It's done, Dominic said without preamble. I'm on my way back. What did he want? We'll talk when I get there. It's complicated. He ended the call before she could press for details. When he arrived home an hour later, his expression was dark, his movements sharp with barely contained anger. He went straight to his office, and Arya followed, closing the door behind them. What happened? Dominic poured himself a drink. Whiskey, neat, and downed it in one swallow. Your father is smarter than I gave him credit for. What does that mean? He didn't make demands. He made an offer. A very calculated, very clever offer that I can't refuse without looking weak or unreasonable. Dominic's fingers tightened on the glass. He wants to throw you a reception, a formal introduction to all the families, showing off the alliance, celebrating the marriage. Says it's tradition, that people have been asking about it, that declining would be an insult to everyone. Arya's blood ran cold. That's not tradition. That's a trap. I know. But he made the offer in front of witnesses, including 3 other family heads. If I refuse, it looks like I'm ashamed of you or trying to hide the alliance. It undermines everything. So we're trapped. Not trapped. Careful. He set down the glass and turned to face her fully. We'll go. We'll play along. But we'll be ready for whatever he's actually planning. You don't understand what he's like when he thinks he has power. He'll use this reception to humiliate you or me or both of us. He'll find some way to make you look weak. Then we make sure he doesn't succeed. Dominic crossed to her, his hands settling on her shoulders. I need you to trust me. Can you do that? Arya looked up at him, at the fierce determination in his eyes, and realized with a jolt that she did trust him. Somewhere along the way, without her quite noticing, trust had stopped being impossible and started being inevitable. Yes, she said, I trust you. His expression softened. Good, because I'm going to need you to be strong at this reception. Your father will try to get to you, try to make you doubt yourself or doubt us. Don't let him. I won't. Promise me. Because the moment he sees weakness, he'll exploit it. You know that better than anyone. She did know, had lived it her entire life. I promise, she said, I won't give him the satisfaction. Dominic's hand slid from her shoulders to frame her face, and for a long moment, they just looked at each other. Then he leaned in, and this time when his lips touched hers, it wasn't the chaste kiss from their wedding or the gentle forehead kiss from that morning. This was real, deep, claiming. Arya's hands came up to his chest, and she kissed him back with all the fear and fury and unexpected feeling that had been building for weeks. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Dominic rested his forehead against hers. I'm falling for you, he said quietly. I didn't plan to, didn't expect it, but I am. The words hit Arya like a physical blow. She wanted to say them back, wanted to admit that she felt the same pull, the same inevitable slide toward something that terrified and thrilled her in equal measure. But the words stuck in her throat, trapped behind years of learning that feelings were weaknesses, and love was just another word for control. I know, Dominic said, reading her silence. You're not ready to say it. That's okay. I can wait. He kissed her again, softer this time, then stepped back. The reception is Saturday. 3 days? We'll be ready. The next 72 hours passed in a blur of preparations. Dominic brought in additional security, reviewed every detail of the event with his most trusted men, and made contingency plans for a dozen different scenarios. Arya worked with Teresa to choose a dress, something elegant but strong, a deep emerald that made her look powerful instead of decorative. Lena was nervous about attending, but Arya insisted. I need you there, she'd said. I need to see your face and remember what I'm protecting. I'm scared something bad will happen. Something bad probably will happen, but we'll handle it. Together. The morning of the reception, Arya woke early to find Dominic already gone. Last-minute security checks, Marco had said. She spent the morning trying not to think about all the ways this could go wrong, all the traps her father might have laid. By the time evening arrived, her nerves were stretched to breaking. The reception was being held at one of Salvatore's properties, a sprawling estate on the outskirts of the city that had once belonged to a rival family before her father had absorbed their territory. The symbolism wasn't subtle. This was Salvatore's ground, Salvatore's power. The drive there felt endless. Dominic sat beside her in the back of the car, his hand covering hers on the seat between them. Remember, he said quietly, whatever happens, we leave together. No matter what your father says or does, you walk out of there with me. Understood? Understood. The estate was lit up like a carnival, cars lining the long driveway, valets in crisp uniforms directing traffic. Inside, the ballroom was packed with people. Every major family, every important associate, plus their wives and children and hangers-on. Easily 200 people, all dressed in their finest, all watching. Salvatore stood near the entrance, greeting guests like a king holding court. When he saw Dominic and Arya approaching, his smile was wide and warm and completely false. Dominic, Arya, my darling daughter, welcome, welcome. He embraced Arya, and she had to force herself not to stiffen. His voice was low in her ear. You look beautiful, like your mother. Let's hope you're smarter than she was. It was a threat disguised as a compliment. Classic Salvatore. Thank you for hosting this, Salvatore, Dominic said smoothly. Very generous of you. Of course. We're family now. We should celebrate that. Salvatore's eyes glittered with something dangerous. Come, let me introduce you around. There are some people very eager to meet the happy couple. The next hour was a carefully orchestrated performance. Salvatore paraded them through the crowd, making introductions, telling stories about Arya's childhood that painted him as a loving father instead of the tyrant he actually was. All the while, Arya smiled and played her part, feeling Dominic's hand steady at her back. She spotted Lena across the room talking to Isabella Moretti, looking nervous but safe. Marco stood nearby, his eyes constantly scanning the crowd. Everything seemed fine, too fine. The first sign that something was wrong came during dinner. They were seated at the head table, Salvatore in the center, Dominic to his right, Arya beside Dominic. The meal was elaborate, course after course, wine flowing freely. Salvatore kept toasting to the alliance, to family, to the future. And then, during dessert, he stood with his glass raised. "Everyone, if I could have your attention." The room quieted. "I want to thank you all for coming tonight to celebrate my daughter's marriage to Dominic Romano. It's a partnership I'm very proud of." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. "But there's another reason I wanted everyone here tonight." Salvatore's smile widened. "You see, family is complicated. Sometimes we make decisions without understanding all the consequences. Sometimes we need to correct our mistakes." Arya's stomach clenched. This was it. Whatever he'd planned, it was happening now. "That's why I'm so pleased to announce that I've negotiated a new arrangement, one that will strengthen all our families even further." Salvatore gestured toward the door. "Carlo, please join us." The room erupted in shocked whispers as Carlo Marchetti walked in, flanked by two of his men. He was exactly as Arya remembered, old, cruel-eyed, with a smile that made her skin crawl. Dominic's hand found hers under the table, squeezing hard. "You see," Salvatore continued, "I've decided that the best way to solidify our alliances is through multiple marriages. Arya is with Dominic, yes. But Lena will marry Carlo as originally planned. 2 unions, twice the power." Across the room, Lena went pale as death. Isabella's hand shot out to steady her. "Salvatore," Dominic's voice was cold, controlled. "We discussed this. Lena is not part of any arrangement." "Ah, but that was when she was living in your house, under your protection." "She's not anymore." Salvatore's smile was triumphant. "Lena came home this afternoon, didn't she, sweetheart?" All eyes turned to where Lena had been standing, but she wasn't there anymore. The space beside Isabella was empty. Arya's heart stopped. "What did you do?" she demanded, standing so fast her chair tipped backward. "I took back what's mine. My daughter, my decision." Salvatore looked at Dominic. "She's already with Marchetti's people. The wedding will take place next week. You can attend if you'd like. After all, we're family." The room was utterly silent. Everyone watching, everyone waiting to see what Dominic Romano would do when challenged so publicly. Dominic stood slowly, his expression utterly calm. When he spoke, his voice carried across the entire ballroom. "You made a mistake, Salvatore." "Did I? I don't think so. I think I just reminded everyone here who holds the real power in this alliance." "No." Dominic's hand moved to his jacket, and suddenly Marco and a dozen other men appeared from positions throughout the room, all armed. "You just showed everyone exactly what kind of man you are. The kind who breaks agreements, the kind who can't be trusted." Salvatore's smile faltered. "See, the thing is," Dominic continued, "I knew you'd try something tonight. I've been around men like you my whole life, so I took precautions." He pulled out his phone, pressed a button, and suddenly the large screens mounted around the ballroom flickered to life. Security footage. Multiple angles, multiple rooms. And there, on every screen, was Lena. Not being kidnapped, but walking calmly through a back hallway with Marco's men, getting into a car, being driven away to safety. "Lena left 2 hours ago," Dominic said, "before you had a chance to grab her. She's safe at my estate right now, with enough security to withstand an army. So your little trap? It failed." Salvatore's face went purple with rage. "You planned this. I prepared for your betrayal, yes. Because unlike you, I actually protect the people under my care." Dominic's eyes swept the room. "Everyone here needs to understand something. The alliance between the Romano and Valenti families is over. Salvatore broke faith. He tried to use his own daughter as a pawn against me. I don't work with men I can't trust." Gasps echoed through the ballroom. Dissolving an alliance publicly like this was huge. It would send shockwaves through every family. But Dominic wasn't done. "However," he continued, "I am establishing a new alliance with Arya Romano, my wife. She and I will be building our own power base, separate from her father's influence. Anyone interested in partnering with us instead of with a man who breaks his word is welcome to reach out." It was a declaration of war, not with bullets and blood, but with politics and power. Dominic had just split the Valenti family in half, claiming Arya and publicly humiliating Salvatore in front of everyone who mattered. Salvatore lunged forward, but Marchetti's men held him back. "You little bastard," Salvatore snarled. "I'll destroy you for this. I'll take everything. You'll try." Dominic's voice was ice. "And you'll fail, because I'm smarter than you, stronger than you, and I actually inspire loyalty instead of just fear." He took Aria's hand. "We're leaving. And Salvatore, if you ever threaten my wife or her sister again, I won't just end our alliance. I'll end you." He turned, and Aria walked beside him, her head high, her hand clasped in his. Behind them, the ballroom erupted in chaos, shouting, arguing, families choosing sides. But Aria didn't look back. She'd spent her whole life in her father's shadow. Tonight, she'd stepped into the light, and she was never going back. The car ride back to the estate was silent except for the hum of the engine and the occasional crackle of Marco's radio as he coordinated with the security teams. Aria sat rigid in her seat, her hand still clasped in Dominic's, her mind replaying the last hour on an endless loop. Her father's face when Dominic had exposed his plan. The shock rippling through the crowd. The weight of 200 pairs of eyes watching her walk away from everything she'd ever known. "Breathe," Dominic said quietly. She realized she'd been holding her breath and let it out in a shaky exhale. "I just declared war on my own father." "I declared war on your father. You just chose which side you're on." His thumb stroked across her knuckles. "Having second thoughts?" "No." The answer came faster than she expected. "I just keep thinking about what happens next. He won't let this go. He'll retaliate." "Let him try. We'll be ready." When they pulled through the gates of the Romano estate, extra security was visible everywhere. Men positioned along the perimeter, vehicles stationed at strategic points, lights blazing from every window. The house looked like a fortress preparing for siege. Inside, Lena was pacing the main salon, her face tear-streaked. She ran to Aria the moment they entered. "I'm so sorry," Lena sobbed into Aria's shoulder. "This is all my fault. If I hadn't needed protecting, if I'd just been stronger—" "Stop." Aria pulled back to look at her sister. "This isn't your fault. This is Papa being exactly who he's always been. A man who sees his daughters as property instead of people. But now you're in danger because of me. Dominic's entire alliance is at risk." "The alliance was already at risk," Dominic said, shrugging out of his jacket. "Your father was always going to betray us eventually. Better to control when and how that happened than to wait for him to choose his moment." He poured 3 glasses of whiskey, handing one to each sister. "Besides, we're not in as much danger as Salvatore thinks." Aria took a sip, feeling the burn steady her nerves. "What do you mean?" "I've been preparing for this possibility since before we married. Moving assets, securing alternative partnerships, building leverage." Dominic settled into a chair, his posture relaxed despite everything. "Your father thinks he has power because he controls territory and commands fear. But real power comes from loyalty, from people choosing to follow you. And most of his associates were already unhappy with how he operates." "So what happens now?" Lena asked. "Now we wait. Salvatore will make his move, probably within the next 48 hours. He'll try to look strong, try to punish us publicly. And when he does, we'll be ready to counter." Dominic's eyes found Aria's. "But I need you to understand something. This is going to get ugly. Your father won't just go after me. He'll come after you too. Try to turn public opinion, make it seem like you betrayed him instead of him betraying you. Let him try. I know the truth. The truth doesn't always matter in our world. Perception does." He leaned forward. "I need to know you can handle what's coming. The rumors, the accusations, the people who will turn their backs on you because they're afraid of choosing the wrong side." Aria thought about all the years she'd spent being invisible, being careful, being whatever her father needed her to be to survive. She thought about the bruises she'd hidden, the fears she'd swallowed, the life she'd accepted because she hadn't known there was any other option. "I can handle it," she said. "I've been handling him my whole life. The only difference now is that I'm not doing it alone." Something shifted in Dominic's expression. Pride, maybe, or respect. "No, you're not alone anymore." The first blow came at dawn. Aria woke to the sound of shouting outside, car doors slamming, boots on gravel. She was out of bed and pulling on a robe before she was fully conscious, Dominic already moving toward the window. "Stay back," he ordered, but she ignored him, coming to stand beside him. Below, at least 30 men were gathered at the front gates. Salvatore's men. She recognized some of them. They weren't trying to break through, just standing there in a show of force. A threat. Marco appeared in the doorway, his phone in hand. "Boss, we've got similar groups at the north and east perimeters. They're not engaging, just positioning." "He's trying to make us look weak," Aria said. "Make it seem like we're under siege." "Smart," Dominic acknowledged. "If we do nothing, we look cornered. If we engage, we look aggressive and trigger an actual conflict." "So what do we do?" Dominic was quiet for a moment, thinking. Then he turned to Marco. Get me a camera crew, professional quality, and prepare a statement for release to all the families. What kind of statement? The kind that changes the narrative. Dominic looked at Arya. How do you feel about going public with your father's abuse? The real story of what your life was like before you came here? Arya's breath caught. Making that private pain public felt like tearing open old wounds. But she also understood the strategy. Sympathy was currency in their world. A daughter escaping an abusive father had far more power than a rebellious child turning on family. I'll do it, she said, whatever it takes. Within 3 hours, they'd filmed a video that would be sent to every major family. Arya sat beside Dominic, her posture straight, her voice steady as she spoke directly to the camera. My name is Arya Romano, and I want to address the rumors you've all been hearing about the dissolution of the alliance between my husband and my father. Many of you have known my father for years. You've done business with him, trusted him, perhaps even respected him. But there are things you don't know about Salvatore Valenti. Things I've hidden because I was taught that family loyalty means suffering in silence. She took a breath, feeling Dominic's hand settle supportively on her back, just out of frame. My father has been violent toward me and my sister our entire lives. He treated us not as daughters, but as assets to be traded for profit. When he tried to force my younger sister into marriage with a man known for his cruelty, I made a choice to protect her. I chose to marry Dominic Romano, not because I was forced, but because it was the only way to save my sister from a life of abuse. Her voice strengthened as she continued. My father promised he would respect that choice. Instead, he has threatened both of us, attempted to kidnap my sister, and broken every agreement he made. Last night, he tried to publicly humiliate my husband and force my sister into the very marriage I sacrificed myself to prevent. This isn't about family loyalty. This is about a man who sees his daughters as property and his word as meaningless. She looked directly into the camera, her eyes fierce. I am Arya Romano now. My loyalty is to my husband, my sister, and the family we're building together. I will not apologize for choosing safety over submission, and I will not be silent anymore about what my father really is. When the recording ended, Arya felt wrung out, exposed, but also lighter somehow, as if speaking the truth had released something that had been pressing against her ribs for years. Dominic dismissed the crew, then pulled her into his arms. That was brave, he said quietly. I know that wasn't easy. It was necessary. She pressed her face against his chest, breathing in his scent, cedar and smoke and something uniquely him. What happens now? Now we send it out and wait for the fallout. The fallout came fast and fierce. Within hours of the video's release, Arya's phone was flooded with messages. Some were supportive, women thanking her for speaking out, associates expressing sympathy. But others were vicious. Accusations of lying, of betrayal, of being manipulated by Dominic into turning on her father. Salvatore himself released a counterstatement, painting himself as a heartbroken father whose daughter had been brainwashed by an ambitious husband. He claimed Arya was unstable, emotional, making up stories to justify her disloyalty. Classic, Arya muttered, reading his statement on her phone. I'm either a liar or I'm crazy. No possibility that I might actually be telling the truth. People who've dealt with him will know better, Dominic said. They were in his office, monitoring responses, tracking which families were publicly choosing sides. Your father's reputation for violence isn't exactly a secret. He's just had enough power that no one dared call him out on it before. Until now. Until now, he agreed. By evening, the landscape had shifted. 3 major families had publicly announced they were severing ties with Salvatore, expressing concern about his stability and judgment. 2 more had reached out privately to Dominic, suggesting meetings to discuss new partnerships. But Salvatore's core allies remained loyal, and that meant the real fight was just beginning. He'll need to do something big, Arya said, studying the maps Marco had laid out showing territory divisions and alliance networks. Something to prove he's still powerful, still in control. Agreed. Question is what? Dominic traced a finger along one of the borders between their territories. If he were smart, he'd go after one of our business operations. Hit us economically, make us look weak without triggering open warfare. But he's not thinking smart right now. He's thinking angry. Arya tapped the map where her father's estate was marked. He's embarrassed, humiliated in front of everyone who matters. Men like him don't respond to that rationally. They lash out. So he'll come after us directly. Or after someone we care about. Arya's blood went cold. Lena. He'll go after Lena. Dominic was already moving, shouting for Marco. Lock down the estate. No one in or out without explicit authorization. Double the guard on Lena's wing, and get me eyes on every approach route. The explosion cut him off. The blast came from the east wing, a rolling boom that shook the entire house and shattered windows. Arya was thrown sideways, her shoulders slamming into the desk. Alarms shrieked. People were shouting. Somewhere, something was burning. Dominic hauled her to her feet. Are you hurt? No, Lena. Marco, get to the East Wing now. Dominic was already pulling Arya toward the door, one arm around her waist. Stay with me. Don't let go of my hand. They ran through corridors filling with smoke, past guards rushing toward the blast site, past staff evacuating. The East Wing was chaos, flames licking up one wall, debris scattered across the floor, water pouring from broken sprinklers. And in the middle of it all, Lena stood frozen in her doorway, her face white with shock, but apparently unharmed. Lena! Arya broke away from Dominic and grabbed her sister. Are you okay? I'm fine. The explosion was down the hall, not near my room. But Arya, what? Everyone out! Now! Marco was herding them toward the nearest exit, his gun drawn. Move! They burst out onto the lawn, coughing, soaked from the sprinklers. Behind them, the East Wing was engulfed in flames. Fire crews were already arriving, but it was clear the damage was extensive. Dominic's face was stone as he surveyed the destruction, his phone already pressed to his ear. I want to know how they got past our perimeter. I want names, I want footage, and I want it in the next 10 minutes. Arya kept her arms around Lena, both of them shaking. This was attempted murder. Her father had just tried to kill them, and he hadn't cared who else got hurt in the process. Dominic! Marco jogged over, his expression grim. We found the breach. Service entrance on the south side. Looks like they bribed one of the catering staff to leave it unlocked during shift change. Who? Guy named Peretti. He's already gone, probably over the border by now. But boss, we got lucky. The device was meant to take out the whole wing. It malfunctioned, only partially detonated. Malfunctioned or sabotaged? Marco's eyes gleamed. We're checking now. Arya watched the flames consuming what had been Lena's wing, what had been their safe haven, and felt something inside her crystallize into absolute resolve. We end this, she said. Dominic turned to her. What? My father. We end him. Not tomorrow, not next week. Now. She met his eyes, her voice steady despite the adrenaline crashing through her system. He just tried to murder us. He's not going to stop. He'll keep coming until one of us is dead. So we finish this before he gets another chance. Arya, you said you wanted a partner, someone who could stand beside you, not behind you. She stepped closer. Then let me be that partner. Let me help you take him down. Dominic studied her face for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. Tell me what you're thinking. My father's power comes from fear and control. Take those away, and he has nothing. Arya's mind was racing, pieces clicking into place. He's already lost allies after tonight's video. After this bombing attempt, more will pull away. No one wants to be associated with someone who's this sloppy, this out of control. So we isolate him further. We destroy him. Arya's voice was cold, certain. I know where his real power is. I know which operations fund everything else, which associates are only loyal because they profit from him, which secrets he's buried that would turn everyone against him if they came out. How do you know all that? Because I spent 23 years being invisible in his house. People talk around you when they think you don't matter. I listened. I remembered. She looked at Lena. We both did. Lena nodded shakily. I can help too. I know things. Account numbers, names, deals that would get him arrested if the right people found out. Dominic looked between the two sisters, a slow smile spreading across his face. You're not just survivors. You're weapons he spent years creating without realizing it. Exactly. Arya felt the fear from earlier transforming into something sharp and deadly. And it's time we use that against him. They spent the next 6 hours in Dominic's office, now relocated to the undamaged West Wing, planning their attack. Arya and Lena shared everything they knew. Offshore accounts where Salvatore laundered money, judges and politicians he'd bribed, business partners he'd cheated, witnesses he'd threatened into silence. It was a map of corruption so extensive that Dominic's own advisors looked shocked. Your father is sloppy, one of them said, reviewing the financial records Lena had managed to access from memory. All of this is prosecutable if the right authorities get their hands on it. The right authorities are in his pocket, Arya said. But there are federal investigators who've been trying to build a case against him for years. They just never had enough evidence. Until now. Dominic was already making calls, reaching out to contacts, pulling strings that Arya hadn't known existed. If we can get this information to them anonymously, with enough corroboration, they'll move fast. And once he's arrested, his allies will scatter like rats from a sinking ship, Marco added. No one stays loyal to a boss who can't protect them from prosecution. What about Marchetti? Lena asked quietly. He and Papa are close. Won't he try to help? Marchetti is smart enough to distance himself from a federal investigation, Dominic said. Self-preservation always wins out over loyalty in situations like this. Arya watched it all come together. the pieces falling into place, her father's empire being dismantled from the inside out, using his own mistakes against him. It felt like justice, cold and precise, but it also felt like something else, like power. Real power, not the kind that came from fear and violence, but from intelligence and strategy. The kind of power her father had never thought a woman could wield. "There's one more thing," Arya said as dawn began to break outside the windows. "Something that will guarantee he can never come after us again, even if he somehow beats the federal charges." "What?" Dominic asked. "We take the one thing he values more than anything, his reputation." Arya pulled out her phone, scrolling to a video file she'd kept hidden for years. 5 years ago, Papa got drunk and admitted something. I recorded it. I've been too scared to ever use it, but now... She pressed play. Salvatore's voice filled the office, slurred but clear, bragging about a murder he'd committed personally. A rival boss who'd disappeared without a trace, his body never found. He described it in graphic detail, laughing about how he'd fooled the police, how everyone thought the man had fled the country. The room was silent when the recording ended. "That's a confession to first-degree murder," one of Dominic's lawyers said softly, "with no statute of limitations." "If this gets out, he's done," Marco said. "Not just arrested, destroyed. His whole legacy, everything he's built, gone." Arya looked at Dominic. "Is it enough?" "More than enough." He stood, coming around the desk to cup her face in his hands. "Are you sure you want to do this? Once we release this, there's no going back. He's your father." "He stopped being my father the first time he raised his hand to me. The first time he treated Lena like merchandise. The first time he chose power over his own children." Arya's voice was steady. "I'm sure." Dominic kissed her forehead, then her lips, soft and brief. "Then let's end this." The next 48 hours were a carefully choreographed demolition. First, the financial records were leaked to federal investigators through anonymous channels. Within hours, warrants were issued. Salvatore's accounts were frozen, his properties searched, his associates brought in for questioning. Then the murder confession was released to the media, not all at once, but strategically, building momentum. First to journalists known for their integrity, then to law enforcement, then finally to the public. The response was immediate and devastating. Salvatore's remaining allies abandoned him. Associates who'd been loyal for decades suddenly couldn't remember his name. Politicians who'd taken his bribes threw him under the bus to save their own careers. Even Marchetti released a statement expressing shock and disappointment, severing all ties. Within 72 hours of the bombing attempt, Salvatore Valenti was arrested on charges of murder, racketeering, money laundering, bribery, and conspiracy. The bail was set impossibly high. His lawyers abandoned him when his accounts were frozen and he couldn't pay them. He was utterly, completely destroyed. Arya watched his arrest on the news, sitting in Dominic's office with her sister beside her, and Dominic's hand warm on her shoulder. Salvatore looked smaller somehow, diminished without his power and his luxury and his ability to hurt people. He looked like what he'd always been underneath the expensive suits and the fear, a small, cruel man who'd built his empire on the suffering of people weaker than himself. "How do you feel?" Dominic asked quietly. Arya considered the question. She didn't feel triumphant exactly, but she also didn't feel guilty. "Free," she said finally. "For the first time in my life, I feel free." Lena squeezed her hand. "Me too." They sat there together, the three of them, watching Arya's father be led away in handcuffs, and Arya realized something profound. She'd spent her whole life believing that sacrifice meant suffering, that protection meant giving up her own happiness for others. But she'd been wrong. The real sacrifice had been walking away from her father's house, from everything familiar, into an unknown future with a man she didn't know. The real protection had been standing up, speaking out, using her voice and her knowledge as weapons. And the real strength had been choosing partnership over isolation, trust over fear, love over survival. "We should get some sleep," Dominic said, but his hand remained on her shoulder, warm and steady. "In a minute." Arya leaned back against him, feeling his solidity, his strength, his absolute certainty that he would protect her and Lena no matter what came next. "I just want to stay here a little longer." "As long as you need," he murmured against her hair. And in that moment, sitting in the quiet office with the two people she trusted most in the world, Arya finally understood what it meant to be home. Not a place, not a cage, gilded or otherwise, but a choice she made every day to stand beside someone who saw her not as property or a pawn, but as a partner, as an equal. As exactly who she'd always been beneath the fear and the survival, strong, intelligent, and absolutely unbreakable. The weeks following Salvatore's arrest brought changes that rippled through every aspect of Arya's life. The East Wing was being rebuilt, stronger and more secure than before. The families who'd allied with Dominic after the split were proving loyal, their partnerships built on mutual respect rather than fear. And slowly, carefully, Arya was learning what it meant to live without constantly looking over her shoulder. But the biggest change was happening inside her. She noticed it first on a Tuesday morning in late November, waking up with a wave of nausea that sent her rushing to the bathroom. Then again on Wednesday and Thursday. By Friday, she couldn't ignore it anymore. The pregnancy test sat on the bathroom counter, two pink lines stark against white plastic. Arya stared at it, her hand trembling as she picked it up, set it down, picked it up again. Pregnant. She was carrying Dominic's child. The realization hit her like a physical blow. Not fear exactly, but something overwhelming and terrifying and strangely wonderful all at once. A baby. Their baby. A life they'd created together during those nights when the space between them had finally inevitably disappeared. She'd known it was possible, of course. They'd been careful at first, then less careful, then not careful at all. But knowing something intellectually and facing the reality were two very different things. Arya. Dominic's voice came from the bedroom. You okay in there? She looked at herself in the mirror, pale, wide-eyed, her hand pressed unconsciously to her still flat stomach. Then she opened the door. Dominic was already dressed for the day, his tie loose around his neck, concern etched across his features. His eyes went immediately to the test in her hand. Understanding dawned across his face, followed by something that looked like wonder. You're pregnant. It wasn't a question, but she nodded anyway. For a long moment, he just stared at her. Then he crossed the space between them in two strides and pulled her into his arms, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe. We're having a baby, he said against her hair, and his voice was rough with emotion. Are you happy? She asked, the words muffled against his chest. He pulled back just enough to cup her face, his eyes searching hers. Happy? Arya, I'm terrified and thrilled and completely overwhelmed. But yes, I'm happy. His thumb brushed across her cheekbone. Are you? She thought about it, really examined the tangle of feelings in her chest. Fear, yes. Uncertainty about whether she could be a good mother when her own childhood had been so broken. Worry about bringing a child into their dangerous world. But underneath all of that, something else. Something warm and fierce and absolutely certain. Yes, she said, I'm happy. Dominic kissed her then, deep and claiming and full of promise. When they finally broke apart, he rested his forehead against hers. We're going to do this right, he said. Our child is going to grow up safe, loved, protected. Nothing like what you and Lena went through. I swear it. I know. And she did. Whatever else she might doubt, she'd never doubted Dominic's capacity for fierce, protective love. They told Lena that evening over dinner. Her sister's face lit up with pure joy, tears streaming down her cheeks as she hugged Arya. I'm going to be an aunt. Oh, Arya, this is wonderful. Perfect. Exactly what this family needs. New life, new hope. Lena pulled back, her eyes shining. When are you due? Early July, according to the doctor. Arya had called that afternoon, gotten an appointment, heard her baby's heartbeat for the first time through the ultrasound. That rapid flutter had made everything suddenly, viscerally real. July, Lena repeated, smiling. A summer baby. We'll have to get the nursery ready, and clothes, and oh, there's so much to do. Watching her sister's excitement, seeing Dominic's protective hand settle on her still flat stomach, Arya felt something shift inside her chest. For so long, family had meant pain and fear and survival. But this new family they were building was something entirely different. This was love. Real, uncomplicated, unconditional love. The pregnancy progressed smoothly through December and into the new year. Arya's body changed, her stomach rounding, her whole being focused on the life growing inside her. Dominic became even more protective if that was possible, hovering whenever she so much as climbed stairs, insisting she rest, bringing her ridiculous amounts of food. I'm pregnant, not fragile, she told him one afternoon, laughing as he tried to carry her groceries that probably weighed less than 10 pounds. You're carrying my child. That makes you precious. He'd kissed her nose, completely unrepentant. Let me take care of you. And she'd let him, because being cared for was still new enough to feel like a gift. Lena, meanwhile, had found her own path forward. In January, Dominic introduced her to Alessandro Marchesi, the youngest son of a northern family known for their legitimate businesses and relatively clean operations. He was 26, quiet, kind, with dark eyes that lit up when he looked at Lena. Their courtship was gentle, nothing like the forced arrangements that had haunted both sisters' nightmares. Alessandro brought Lena flowers, took her to dinner, listened when she talked. And slowly, carefully, Lena began to believe that not all men in their world were cruel. He asked me to marry him, Lena told Arya one February afternoon. They were in the nursery painting walls a soft yellow while Dominic was in the city for meetings. Arya set down her paintbrush. What did you say? I said I needed to think about it, to be sure. Lena's hand stilled on the wall. Is that terrible? He's wonderful, and I think I love him, but I'm scared. What if I'm wrong? What if he changes after we're married? Then you'll handle it? You're stronger than you think, Lena. Arya moved to sit beside her sister, her growing belly making the movement awkward. But for what it's worth, I don't think Alessandro will change. I've watched him with you. He looks at you the way Dominic looks at me, like you're precious, like you matter. You really think so? I know so. And you deserve that kind of love. You deserve to be happy. Arya took her sister's hand. But only you can decide if he's the one who'll make you happy. Not me, not Dominic, not anyone else. This is your choice. Lena was quiet for a long moment, staring at their joined hands. I want to say yes. I want to build a life with him. I'm just scared of making a mistake. Then wait until you're not scared, or at least until the fear is smaller than the hope. Arya squeezed her hand. You have time. Alessandro isn't going anywhere. 2 weeks later, Lena said yes. The engagement was announced quietly, and the wedding was planned for May. Small, intimate, nothing like the elaborate spectacles their father had always demanded. Arya watched her sister try on wedding dresses and make plans with Alessandro, watched the last shadows of fear finally fade from Lena's eyes, and felt a deep satisfaction. This was what she'd sacrificed herself for. This happiness, this freedom, this chance for Lena to choose her own life. It had been worth it. Every moment of fear, every uncertain step, every risk she'd taken. Worth it. March brought unexpected news. Salvatore's trial date was set for June, and the prosecution wanted both Arya and Lena to testify about the abuse they'd suffered. You don't have to do it, Dominic said when the lawyers first approached them. You've already given them the recording. That's enough evidence. But Arya knew it wasn't about evidence. It was about closure, about standing in front of her father one last time and telling the truth without fear. I want to do it, she said. I want him to hear me say it out loud in a place where he can't hurt me for speaking. Are you sure? You'll be 7 months pregnant by then. The stress will be worth it to finally be free of him completely. Arya met his eyes. I need this, Dominic. I need to look him in the eye and take back every ounce of power he ever had over me. He studied her face for a long moment, then nodded. Okay, but I'm going to be right there with you, every second. I know. That's the only reason I can do it. Lena agreed to testify as well, though she was more nervous about it. What if I freeze? What if I can't get the words out? Then we'll get them out together, Arya assured her. You and me, side by side, the way we've always been. The weeks leading up to the trial were tense. Dominic's lawyers prepared them for what to expect, the kinds of questions they'd be asked, how the defense would try to discredit them. It was exhausting and triggering and necessary. But through it all, Arya felt the baby moving inside her, little flutters at first, then stronger kicks as the weeks passed. Every movement was a reminder of what she was fighting for. Not just closure for the past, but protection for the future. She would not let her child grow up in a world where Salvatore Valenti had any power. She would not let that darkness touch the new life she and Dominic were building. Lena's wedding in early May was exactly what she'd dreamed of, small and beautiful and filled with genuine joy. She wore a simple white dress, her hair crowned with flowers, her smile radiant as she walked down the aisle toward Alessandro. Arya stood as her maid of honor, her hand resting on her very pregnant belly, watching her sister marry a man who looked at her like she hung the moon. Dominic stood beside Alessandro as his best man, and when their eyes met across the altar, Arya felt that familiar pull of connection. This was family, real family, built on choice and love and mutual respect. At the reception, Lena pulled Arya aside, her eyes bright with happy tears. Thank you, she said, for everything, for saving me, for protecting me, for giving me the chance to have this. You would have done the same for me. I don't know if I would have been brave enough, but you were. You've always been the brave one. Lena hugged her carefully, mindful of the baby. I love you, sister. I love you too. Watching Lena dance with her new husband later that night, Arya leaned against Dominic, content. You did good, he murmured against her hair. She's happy, safe, free. We did good, Arya corrected. I couldn't have done any of this without you. His hand settled on her belly, feeling the baby kick. Our daughter is going to be just like you, strong, fierce, unstoppable. How do you know it's a girl? Just a feeling. He turned her in his arms, his eyes soft. But boy or girl, they're going to be loved, protected, given every choice we never had. Promise? I promise. The trial began 3 weeks later on a humid June morning. The courthouse was packed with reporters, curious onlookers, and representatives from every major family. This wasn't just a criminal trial. It was a referendum on Salvatore Valenti's entire empire, his whole way of life. Aria wore a navy dress that accommodated her very pregnant belly, her hair pulled back, her expression calm despite the nerves churning in her stomach. Dominic sat in the front row directly behind the prosecution's table, his eyes never leaving her. When her name was called to testify, she stood carefully, one hand on her belly, and walked to the stand with her head high. Salvatore sat at the defense table looking smaller than she remembered, his expensive suit unable to hide how diminished he'd become without his power. When his eyes met hers, she saw rage there, and hatred, and something that might have been disbelief that his daughter had brought him to this point. She didn't look away. The prosecutor approached, her expression kind. "Mrs. Romano, thank you for being here today. I know this isn't easy." "It's necessary," Aria said, her voice clear and steady. "Can you describe your relationship with your father, Salvatore Valenti?" Aria took a breath, and then she spoke. She told them everything. The violence, the control, the way he'd treated his daughters like property to be traded. She described the beatings, the threats, the absolute terror that had colored her entire childhood. She told them about the forced marriage arrangements, about Marchetti's reputation, about making the choice to marry Dominic to save her sister. And she told them about the final betrayal, the attempted kidnapping, the bombing, the murder confession she'd been too terrified to reveal until she finally had protection. Through it all, her voice never wavered. She looked at the jury, at the judge, at the reporters scribbling notes. And occasionally she looked at her father, meeting his furious gaze with calm certainty. When the prosecutor finished, the defense attorney approached. He tried to discredit her, suggesting she was lying for money or power, that she'd been manipulated by Dominic, that her pregnancy hormones were making her emotional and unreliable. Aria answered every question with the same steady calm, never rising to the bait, never losing her composure. "Mrs. Romano, isn't it true that you married Dominic Romano for his wealth and status?" "No. I married Dominic Romano to save my sister from a forced marriage to a cruel man. The fact that my husband turned out to be honorable and protective was a gift I didn't expect." "But you benefited financially from this marriage, didn't you?" "I benefited from being in a home where I wasn't beaten, where I wasn't treated like property, where I was valued as a person." Aria's eyes were steel. "If you're asking if I regret leaving my father's house, the answer is no. The only thing I regret is not doing it sooner." The defense attorney tried a few more angles, but Aria had spent her whole life reading people, understanding their strategies, staying one step ahead. She didn't falter. When she was finally dismissed, she walked past her father's table with her head high. He said something under his breath. She didn't catch the words, but the venom was clear. She didn't react, didn't give him the satisfaction. Lena testified next, and though she was more visibly nervous, she was just as truthful, just as damning. By the time both sisters had finished, the courtroom was silent with the weight of their testimonies. The trial lasted 2 more weeks. Other witnesses came forward. Former associates, staff members, people who'd been too terrified to speak up before but found courage in Aria and Lena's example. The evidence was overwhelming. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. Guilty on all counts. Salvatore Valenti was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. When the judge read the verdict, he didn't show any emotion, just stared straight ahead, his face a mask. But as they led him away in handcuffs, he turned one last time to look at Aria. She met his eyes, her hand resting on her belly, and she smiled. Not in triumph, exactly, but in freedom. In absolute, complete freedom. He was the one in chains now, and she was the one walking away. Aria went into labor on a sweltering July afternoon, 3 weeks before her due date. She'd been reviewing some contracts with Dominic when her water broke, soaking through her dress and onto the leather chair in his office. "That's not supposed to happen yet," she said, staring down at the puddle. Dominic went pale. "The baby's early. We need to get to the hospital. Now! Marco, start the car!" The drive to the hospital was a blur of contractions, and Dominic's barely controlled panic. He gripped her hand so tightly she was sure she'd have bruises, his eyes wild with fear. "You're going to be fine," he kept saying, though she wasn't sure if he was reassuring her or himself. "You're strong. You're going to be fine." "I know," she managed between contractions, "but you might want to breathe before you pass out." Labor lasted 14 hours. Long, painful hours where Aria discovered depths of strength she hadn't known she possessed. Dominic stayed beside her the entire time, letting her crush his hand, wiping her forehead with cool cloths, whispering encouragement and love. And finally, as the sun was setting outside the hospital windows, their daughter was born. She came into the world screaming, red-faced and furious, her tiny fists waving. The moment they placed her on Arya's chest, she quieted, her dark eyes blinking up at her mother with curious intensity. "She's perfect," Dominic breathed, his voice cracking. "Arya, she's absolutely perfect." And she was. 10 fingers, 10 toes, a shock of dark hair, and the most beautiful face Arya had ever seen. "Hello, little one," Arya whispered, tears streaming down her face. "We've been waiting for you." The baby made a small sound, and Dominic laughed, a watery, overwhelmed sound full of more emotion than Arya had ever heard from him. "What should we name her?" he asked, his finger tracing gently over their daughter's tiny hand. Arya looked down at the baby in her arms, at this new life they'd created together, and knew exactly what her name should be. "Hope," she said softly. Her name is Hope. Because that's what this child represented. Hope for a better future. Hope that the cycle of violence and control could be broken. Hope that love and choice and partnership could create something beautiful from the ashes of everything painful. "Hope Romano," Dominic repeated, testing it out. Then he leaned down to kiss Arya's forehead, then Hope's. "Perfect. She's absolutely perfect." The next few days were a blur of exhaustion and overwhelming love. Lena visited, bringing flowers and tears of joy. Isabella Moretti stopped by with gifts and congratulations. Messages poured in from allies and friends, all celebrating the newest addition to the Romano family. But the most meaningful moment came on their third day in the hospital. Dominic was holding Hope, rocking her gently while Arya rested, when he spoke quietly. "I never thought I'd have this. After my first wife died, after I took over the family business, I thought this kind of happiness wasn't for men like me." He looked down at Hope, then over at Arya. "But you gave me this. A real family, a real future." "We gave each other this," Arya corrected. "You saved me just as much as I saved Lena. You gave me a life where I could be strong instead of just surviving. You were always strong. I just gave you a safe place to show it." He carried Hope over to the bed, carefully settling her in Arya's arms. "I love you. I don't think I've ever actually said it out loud, but I do. I love you, Arya Romano. You and this beautiful child. You're my whole world." The words settled into Arya's chest, warm and right and absolutely true. "I love you too," she said. "I think I have for a while now. I was just too scared to admit it. And now? Now I'm not scared of anything, because I have you. I have Hope. I have Lena safe and happy. I have everything I never knew I could have." She looked down at their sleeping daughter. "I chose you in the beginning because I had no other option, but I'd choose you now with 1,000 options. I'd choose this life, this family, this love, every single time." Dominic kissed her then, deep and sweet and full of promise. When they broke apart, he rested his forehead against hers, careful not to disturb Hope sleeping between them. "We're going to give her everything," he murmured. "Every opportunity, every choice, every chance to be whoever she wants to be." "Yes," Arya agreed, "and we're going to teach her to be strong, to stand up for herself, to never let anyone make her feel small or powerless. She'll learn that from you. You're the strongest person I know." Arya thought about the girl she'd been just months ago, invisible, terrified, believing her only value was in sacrifice. And she thought about who she was now, a wife, a mother, a partner, in building an empire based on respect instead of fear. The transformation had been painful, terrifying, necessary, but it had been worth it. Every risk, every fear, every moment of uncertainty. Worth it to be sitting here now with the man she loved and the daughter they'd created together. Worth it to be free. 6 months later, on a crisp January morning, Arya stood on the terrace overlooking the vineyards with Hope bundled against her chest in a carrier. The baby was awake, her dark eyes tracking the movement of birds in the trees, her tiny hand wrapped around Arya's finger. Inside, she could hear Dominic on a call, his voice carrying through the open doors as he negotiated some new business deal. The Romano family had grown significantly in the past year, expanding into legitimate businesses, building partnerships based on mutual benefit rather than coercion. They'd started a foundation too, Arya's idea, that helped women and children escape abusive situations. They provided safe houses, legal assistance, job training, all the things Arya and Lena had needed but never had access to until Dominic. It was a legacy she could be proud of, one that turned their pain into something meaningful. Lena and Alessandro were expecting their first child in March. They'd moved into a house nearby, close enough to visit frequently, but far enough to build their own life together. Lena seemed to glow with happiness these days, all the fear and trauma of their childhood finally healing. And Salvatore was exactly where he belonged, locked away where he could never hurt anyone again. Arya had visited him once, 3 months after Hope was born, to show him what he'd lost through his cruelty. He'd looked at her through the prison glass, at the baby in her arms, and for the first time in her life, Arya had seen something that might have been regret in his eyes. But she hadn't gone back. That chapter was closed. She'd said what she needed to say, proven what she needed to prove. Now she was focused on the future, not the past. There you are. Dominic stepped out onto the terrace, his jacket discarded, his tie loosened. He wrapped his arms around both of them, kissing Hope's head, then Arya's temple. How are my girls? We're good. Hope was just admiring the birds. Smart girl, just like her mother. He rested his chin on Arya's shoulder, the three of them looking out over the grounds together. I was thinking about the foundation. We've had 12 women reach out this week alone asking for help. We're going to need to expand. We will. We'll build more safe houses, hire more staff, help as many people as we can. Arya leaned back against him. We're making a difference, aren't we? You're making a difference. This was your vision. I'm just helping make it happen. We're a team. We do it together. Always together, he agreed. Hope made a small sound, her hand squeezing Arya's finger, and both parents smiled down at her. This was what Arya had been fighting for all along, even before she knew it was possible. Not just escape from her father's cruelty, but this: love, safety, purpose, a family built on choice rather than obligation. She'd walked into a marriage believing she was choosing the lesser evil, trading one cage for another. But she'd been wrong about so many things. Dominic wasn't a cage. He was freedom. This life wasn't a prison. It was a gift. And love wasn't weakness. It was the strongest thing she'd ever known. What are you thinking about? Dominic asked, reading her expression. How far we've come. How different everything is now compared to a year ago. Arya turned in his arms, careful not to jostle Hope. I was so scared when I agreed to marry you. I thought I was sacrificing myself. And now? Now I know the truth. I wasn't sacrificing myself. I was saving myself, finding myself, becoming who I was always meant to be. She stood on her toes to kiss him. You didn't make me strong, Dominic, but you gave me a place where I could finally be strong without apologizing for it. His eyes were soft as he cupped her face. And you gave me a reason to be more than just a crime boss. You showed me that power doesn't have to come from fear, that loyalty can be earned through respect, that family can mean love instead of obligation. Hope squirmed between them, demanding attention, and they both laughed. She's going to rule the world someday, Dominic said, smoothing down their daughter's dark hair. Probably, Arya agreed. But she'll do it with kindness and strength in equal measure, because that's what we're going to teach her. That's what you'll teach her. You're living proof that gentle hearts can have steel spines. They stood there on the terrace as the winter sun climbed higher in the sky, the three of them together, their future stretching out bright and full of possibility. Arya had started this journey believing she had no choices, no power, no hope for anything better than survival. But she'd been wrong. She'd always had power, she just hadn't known how to use it. She'd always had choices, she just hadn't believed she deserved to make them. And she'd always had hope. She just hadn't dared to dream it could be real. Now standing with her husband and her daughter, with her sister safe and happy, with a future they were building together based on respect and partnership and fierce protective love, Arya finally understood the truth. The choice she'd made that night at Dominic's estate, the choice to marry him, to step forward, to claim her own fate instead of letting it be chosen for her, that wasn't the end of her story. It was the beginning. The beginning of a life where she wasn't invisible, wasn't powerless, wasn't afraid. The beginning of a love that grew stronger every day, built on trust and respect, and the absolute certainty that they were better together than they could ever be apart. The beginning of a family, real family, defined not by blood and obligation, but by choice and devotion and unwavering support. And most of all, the beginning of freedom. True, hard-won, beautiful freedom. The kind of freedom that came from standing up, speaking out, and refusing to let fear dictate her future. The kind of freedom that came from choosing love over survival, partnership over isolation, hope over despair. The kind of freedom she would fight to protect for the rest of her life, and pass down to her daughter, and use to help other women find their own way out of darkness. Because that was the real power her father had never understood. Not the power to control and dominate and destroy, but the power to choose, to grow, to build something beautiful from the ashes of something broken. The power to love and be loved exactly as you are. That was the power Arya claimed as her own, and she would never let anyone take it away again.